Hello, my name is Nino Angelo M. Saranya, and me and my group mates were tasked to report on MELC 9, which is to identify the elements and levels of communication. So without further ado, let us get right into the report. Professionals and practitioners in communication. Communication practitioners and their areas of specialization. Communicators and journalists are typically expected to be in the following fields. Journalism. Attending a communication or a journalism school would normally mean to intend to become a news writer, reporter, or story producer. Although not strictly a professional degree because of the absence of licensure examinations, journalism is a legitimate profession by the virtue of its impact on all the facets of society. Communication education. Some communication graduates intentionally immerse themselves in industry practice to gain experience which can be carried once they enter the academe. They say that experience is the best teacher, thus an educator would be more effective if he or she had previously been or currently is an industry practitioner, as he or she has already grasped the nooks and crannies of the profession. Public relations. According to the Public Relations Society of America, PR is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organizations and their publics. It involves communicating the good works of an individual to various audiences to build a certain image. Advertising. Definition for advertising is the non-personal communication of information usually paid for and usually persuasive in nature about products, services, or ideas identified by sponsors through the various media. Media planning. This area is directly associated with advertising because it entails outsourcing to media agencies and finding the optimal media platforms where a product or service could be advertised. And lastly, integrated marketing communication. BusinessDictionary.com defines IMC as an approach to achieving the objectives of a marketing campaign through a well-coordinated use of different promotional methods that are intended to reinforce each other. Roles, functions, and competencies of communication practitioners. The practice of the communication industry can be very demanding. As such, it requires practitioners to obtain the requisite training and prior knowledge of the area, as they are expected to develop, administer, and deliver information to their audiences and clients. Communication professionals are information providers who educate the public about the related ideas that matter. Professional communicators must be qualified professionals because communication is an enterprise that affects every aspect of human life. Media and communication professionals have a great capacity to write, read, communicate, and listen. They are also supposed to be extremely informed about the communication technologies used in their work. Likewise, they have a strong balance of awareness of different fields so that they can present more sound and reliable facts to their audiences. Communication professionals must also have a true understanding of others outside what they are used to in their profession. They should be able to think outside the box and look out for changes in their surroundings so that they can also keep the viewers up to date with these changes. Journalism, a noble cause to communicate. Communication is mainly used to inform, educate, convince, and entertain. Journalism is an influential knowledge-producing organization as a means of communication. This means that if you read, listen, or watch television, you'll be able to get a better understanding on how to deal with the stuff that's going on around you. News is a source of information. News is history. As students, you don't have to restrict yourselves to appreciating news. In fact, it's one of the most efficient ways to inform yourself about topics that haven't been addressed in the classroom. Once you keep on reading news, you become more aware of the current issues and developments. Here are the forms of journalism. Advocacy journalism. This is a form of journalism that consciously frames stories and news narratives as a subtle promotion of advocacies that can give voice to the marginalized. Broadcast journalism. This is a kind of journalism that is present on radio and television. Citizen journalism. This is a form of journalism that evolved to promote the active involvement of the public in the process of news gathering and delivery. This form is still subject to debate, as some contend that professional training is still a necessary and important factor in effective practice of journalism. Interactive journalism. It is a form of journalism that is seen online or over the web. It puts together the traditional elements of print journalism and the innovative means of the internet. Photojournalism. It is a type of journalism that utilizes images and photographs to tell the story. The influence of journalism to society. News are stories that have happened and are still going on. Your reliance in the media as a source of knowledge is one way to relate to the world. Paying your attention to journalistic content is considered priceless by communication professionals because it gives them an ability to control your life. Journalism is influential in influencing topics that some consider banal and transient. It encourages young people to be critical of different social structures such as politics, the economy, and educational institutions, to name but a few. Journalism sheds light on people in the dark. This means that a citizen like you performs better when he or she is inspired to actively search enlightening and reliable knowledge. A society with a working democracy has well-informed people. We now have Zach Gravador to continue the report.
Hi. Today I'm gonna report into the depths of the journalist's mind. Into the depths of the journalist's mind. If you are curious on what's going on in the minds of journalists when they are seeking and writing newsworthy events, the following are the guides them in the practice and the process. Rules, routines, institutionalized procedures, and systems of classification in the production of knowledge. Factors that help them decide what is sufficiently true and authoritative on what they are about to report to the public. Tricks to journalism. Media and communication in the Philippines is highly commercial business oriented. With that being the case, some news content are trivialized and dubbed down to a level that is almost simplistic and mundane. Whatever journalism that is published, they are being criticized and even judged. More likely, journalism in our country is so much business-oriented that they were made less important, and when the content will not fit to the level of expectation, attention may be less and to no satisfaction. Due to democracy, people may be able to practice their rights and freedom of expression as to how the journalism has impact to their daily lives. Deciding on what is new. Usually, teacher or journalism would train their students the news values of criteria in selecting stories that are worthy to presented. Knowing what criteria are used when choosing what stories to tell and how to tell them gives you an insider's look on how journalists think on what is important. Number 1. News factor. Journalism are the ones who evaluate the characteristics that make a story worth reporting. Number 2. Institutional objectives. These include the expectations that a journalist faces as a consequence of his or her employment status. Number 3. Manipulative power of news sources. Sometimes, journalists can be at the mercy of a source, especially for a scoop or an exclusive story, or the refusal of the source to vouch for information he or she has shared to the journalist when worse comes to worse. Number 4. Subjective beliefs of journalists. A journalist's predispositions, biases towards an issue or an actor can affect his or her news decisions. Careers in communication and journalism. The areas that have been mentioned in this module are practically where careers in communication and journalism abound. But as Wood 2015 has suggested, communication graduates may also engage themselves in research if they want to become educators as part of an academic endeavor. Communication and journalism go hand in hand in order to create a relevant and important news or article. Furthermore, for a journalism graduate, they should study further about any communication courses, trainings, consultations, or master's degree according to their participation and willingness to explore. It may not be an easy task, but going for it will lead to more knowledge on communication background and better understanding as to what really journalism is all about. Also, a career in human relations and management courses are appropriate to and on the job training will certainly train them new strategies as to what real world in journalism operate, not just theory.
Good day everyone. Today we're going to talk about the rights, responsibilities, and accountabilities of a communication practitioner, issues that communicators contend with, libel as a threat to human dignity, the ethics of communication, the ethics in journalism, and handling communication-related complaints. Rights, responsibilities, and accountabilities of communication practitioners. Every communication practitioner must demonstrate the basic understanding of the laws and ethical principles governing media and communication, and the extent and limitations of the freedom of expression. Having a sound foundation in the ethical standards in the media and communication industry enables communication practitioners to perform their functions more responsibly and to encourage the audience to exert the same level of responsibility and critically. There are many legal and ethical issues, problems, and concerns that confront the profession, so it pays to be wary of the issues that practitioners may potentially struggle with when performing their roles. Issues that communicators contend with. Having a career in communication will mean having to face the following issues and the dilemma of balancing competing interests: freedom of expression and its limitation, libel and slander, rights of privacy, copyrights and trademarks, fair trial-free press conflicts, new gatherers' privilege, freedom of information, obscenity and pornography, regulation of electronic media, media ownership, and national security. A communication practitioner is guided by ethical and legal principles once he or she has faced such issues. It will be a matter of understanding his or her function as a communication practitioner and when his or her obligation ends. Libel as a threat to human dignity. You may understand libel as a false statement that can threaten a person's reputation, but in a legal perspective, libel is a crime against honor. According to Article 353 of the Revised Penal Code of the Philippines, it is defined as public and malicious imputation of a crime or of a vice defect, real or imaginary, or any act of omission, condition, status, or circumstance tending to cause the dishonor, discredit, or contempt of a natural or juridical person or to blacken the memory of who is dead. Libel constitutes 4 elements and the absence of one does not constitute a libelous remark. Number 1. Defamatory imputation or defamation, or the attack on the reputation of a person, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or true or false. Second, malice, or bad faith, where every defamatory imputation is presumed to be malicious, even if it be true, if no good intention and justifiable motive for making it is shown. Third, identification, or when a person defamed is identifiable in the material and the person defamed must be ascertainable. Fourth, publication, or communicating the offending material to third person other than the defamed person of the person who defames. The ethics of communication. Almost all fields demand a code of conduct for its practitioners. Some institutions strictly enforce ethical standards and policies on behavior among their peers and employees. A list of the codes of ethics and the guide communicators in their practice are provided below. This list is partial and not exhaustive. The first one is general practice. Second is print and online media. Third is broadcast media. Fourth is film or cinema. Fifth is advertising. Sixth is public relations. And lastly, seventh, communication or social research. So here are some common ethical issues in broadcast media. Number 1, depiction of violence and sex and the presence of strong language. Second, product placement. Third, stereotyping. Fourth, taboos and sensitive content. Now here are some common ethical issues in film or cinema. Number 1, the welfare of those involved in the production of this film. Second, the welfare of the subjects of the film. Third, making clear to the audience the purpose of the film. And lastly, fourth, accurate representations and reactions of reality. And now, these are some common ethical issues in advertising. Number 1, false advertising. Number 2, fraudulent use of propaganda content. Number 3, stealth advertising. Number 4, targeting children. And lastly, number 5, resulting to stereotyping and gratuitous sexual content. And now let's talk about some common ethical issues in public relations. Number 1, bending or twisting the truth in favor of a good image. Number 2, preoccupation on facts and compromising content. Number 3, transparency in reporting the background of a PR client. And lastly, crossing over to advertising. And now lastly, let's talk about some common ethical issues in social content. Number 1, voluntary participation. Number 2, informed consent. Number 3, privacy through confidentiality. Number 4, privacy through anonymity. And lastly, number 5, person's right to service. And now moving on, let's talk about ethics and journalism. The relationship between basic human values and ethical principles. An observation made by Teodoro and De Jesus showed that all these ethical guidelines are constituted by basic human values of truth-telling, justice, freedom, humaneness, and stewardship. The basic human values are core principles of every code conduct or ethics manual that different fields in communication can always rely on guidance. And now lastly, let's talk about handling communication-related complaints. Communication is not always as ideal as it sounds. More often than not, vigilant audiences would always like to seek for redress or to express their opinions regarding the media. In journalism, there are people assigned in handling and tackling communication issues within an organization. These people are independent from the organization and thus are not employees. They must be disinterested parties so that they can objectively and independently address the complaints of the audiences. These people who audit communication and address audience complaints are called Ombudsmen. The Australian Communications and Media Authority defined a telecommunications industry ombudsman as someone who resolves disputes that have something to do with telecommunication. Media organizations should always be open to be audited by an ombudsman. The ombudsman, for his or her part, must make sure that he or she is not influenced by the organization so as to protect the sanctity and objectivity of the audit. In the case of the Philippines, however, having an ombudsman in a media organization is rare, if not almost inexistent. Moreover, Filipino audiences lack the knowledge of what a communication ombudsman is, or even what his or her functions and obligations are. Ideally, an ombudsman makes sure that the audiences have a transparent access to the information regarding activities of media organizations. This is to encourage more vigilance on the part of the audiences. I hope that this report helped you gain more knowledge about media and journalism. And that is all. Thank you for listening.